Hello everyone, welcome to Law Excellence Kalam Mains Answer Writing Program Season 3. In this week, we'll be discussing history questions that appeared in previous year UPSC exam. Now, in this section, we'll be discussing modern history questions, ancient and medieval history questions, even world history related questions, and also we'll cover post-independent India questions. And at the same time, we'll be covering cultural heritage related questions too. It's not like we don't understand the distinction between cultural heritage and history. We have included cultural heritage here. Our intention to include is that because we feel that cultural process or cultural heritage evolves in a historical context, and you can't separate cultural growth and prosperity from the historical forces. So based on this idea, we have included cultural heritage related questions also under history discussion. Okay, now before starting our discussion, we will just see the weightage of this section in previous year exams. For example, in 2013, almost 150 marks were asked from this section out of 250. And even in 2014 also, somewhere around 150 marks were asked. Almost more than 50% of the weightage is given to this section. But however, from 2015 onwards, the weightage to this section got reduced. In the last few years, if you see the weightage, almost 70 to 80 marks were asked from this section. And out of all the areas in GS paper 1, for example, geography and society, history part is the most static part, and you can really score if you have the content. And if you observe the nature of the questions that were asked from history, and most of the questions are so broad, and for most of the questions every aspirant will be having some or the other information, so there won't be any shortage of information. The problem is how you organize that content, how you organize that information to suit to the demands of the question. This is what the problem, and you have to do it in just 5 or 7 minutes. So this reorganizing of your content to suit to the demands of the question is very much important. Now we will look into our question. This question was asked in year 2019, the recent year. So what was the question? The 1857 uprising was the culmination of the recurrent big and small local rebellions that had occurred in the preceding 100 years of British rule. Elucidate. Two words are important. One is culmination and the second one is elucidate. So what is the meaning of this directive elucidate? Elucidate means it's clearly explaining what is asked in the question. Okay. Now most of the answers which we got here, they mostly gave a list of rebellions that happened prior to 1857. Is that what question is asking? Is the question is asking just to list out those events that happened prior to 1857? There are some tens of rebellions that happened prior to 1857, and the question is not just asking you to list those events, and it is also not asking about 1857 uprising. Now the question clearly asks how the various local rebellions that happened prior to 1857 resulted in or culminated in 1857 uprising. So you have to establish the linkage between these local rebellions and other rebellions that happened prior to 1857 and how it got related to 1857 uprising. Okay. Now see, there are tens of rebellions that happened, right? So which rebellions you can choose? Because it is only 150 words, 10 marks. So you have to write max within 7 minutes. So which type of rebellions you have to choose? And what is the criteria you adopt to choose a particular rebellion to narrate your answer? Now the key to that is given, the hint is given in the question itself. This is what 1857 uprising, and you should know who are the sections involved in 1857 uprising and what are the causes responsible for 1857 uprising. For example, if you know that because of doctrine of lapse there are some kings who participated in 1857 uprising, then you should know whether there are any instances in the history where kings revolted against the British because of the succession policy. So those events you have to write, And if you are aware that Jamindars also revolted against British in 1857 uprising, then you should know what are the causes that are responsible for Jamindars to revolt against Britishers, and you have to trace back these causes. For example, whether in history, whether Jamindars revolted against Britishers, so those events you have to pick. So it's not like listing of all the rebellions that happened, okay? And most of the answers which we got, they focused mostly on Jamindar or tribal rebellions. Of course these are important, but this is not the demand of the question, okay? That you have to understand. Now we will look into the structuring of the answer. Now obviously last week economy we have discussed, and ma'am told you how to structure your answer. So mostly we structure our answer into three components. One is introduction, intro part, and the content part, and the last one is conclusion part. And one thing, never write introduction and conclusion for namesake, because you won't get any marks for it. And please don't waste writing introduction and conclusion which is not at all relevant, okay? Write an introduction which should reflect the demands of the question, and it should also reflect your understanding of the question. And you should start with a very broader perspective, and it should reflect a matured understanding of the question. This is what you have to try to take into consideration while you write an introduction, okay? Now what is the introduction you have to write for this question, and what is the content you have to write in this question? So here you have to focus on different rebellions that happened in the preceding century before 1857. But which type of rebellions that you have to focus? You have to focus on those rebellions whose causes are same as that of 1857 uprising, okay? And you will be focusing on those sections like Jamindars and sepoys or kings who participated in 1857 uprising, okay? So these are the things which you have to make as content. And conclusion should be like like a comprehension. You should comprehend your understanding and what you have written in the question. So these are the broad things which you have to take into consideration. The only difficulty in this question is that how you establish the linkage between these rebellions and the 1857 uprising. If you write two things in silos, you are not addressing the demands of the question. So our every point which we write in the content, it tries to establish a connectivity between that rebellion and the 1857 uprising. This we have to take care of. Now we will see a model answer which I feel, okay, it is most relevant, and it is almost trying to address each and every part that was asked in the question, okay? Now we will look into the answer. It started with an introduction. We will see what it is written in the introduction, okay? Now the forces, causes that were responsible for the 1857 revolt have a century of history in their formation. Now it tried to establish a link with various rebellions that happened and 1857 revolt by choosing the forces and causes that were responsible for 1857 revolt. So the alienness and exploitative nature of the British resulted in grievances amongst various sections of Indians. Who are these various sections? We have discussed Jamindars, sepoys, kings, peasants, and all the other groups. And especially since Battle of Plassey. Why it mentioned Battle of Plassey? Because the question is about asking events that happened in the preceding 100 years, and you know 1857 sepoy mutiny happened, and in 1757 Battle of Plassey happened. So roughly to locate that, okay, I am focusing on those events which happened after 1857. Now see how it established the linkage. The land revenue settlement systems introduced by the British displaced Jamindars and peasants, okay? And to oppose the higher extraction of revenues and oppressive method of collection of those revenues, many rebellions against Britishers we have witnessed, okay? Now why this is a relevant point? Because revenue policies is one of the important cause for 1857 uprising, and we have to trace back how these revenue policies in history created various rebellions. So this is how we are establishing a linkage. So which type of events we choose, which type of rebellions we choose those rebellions whose primary cause is the revenue policies of the Britishers. For example, here we have chosen Sannyasi Rebellion. Okay, the Sannyasi Rebellion that happened somewhere in 1763 and 1800. And what is this rebellion? This rebellion is mostly led by sannyasis. Okay, why sannyasis led this rebellion? Because their religious movement was restricted by the British policies. But the sannyasis were supported by peasants and jamindars. And why peasants and jamindars supported sannyasis? Because peasants and jamindars have lots of grievance against the Britishers. Now all these three sections, sannyasis, jamindars and peasants, they have a common enemy in Britishers. So they launched a rebellion called Sannyasi Rebellion. And we also have something called Paika Rebellion. Okay, who are these Paikas? Paikas are nothing but they were traditional military of Odisha. And these people also they also raised a rebellion against Britishers in 1804 and 1806. Now what is this rebellion? It is against the British land revenue policies. Okay, it is against the British land revenue policies. And also we have one more revolt, Parlakimadi outbreak. Where is this place? It is somewhere in border between Andhra Pradesh and Odisha. And this outbreak we have seen somewhere in 1829 to 35. And it is a Jamindar revolt. Okay, Jamindar revolt against Britishers. Now what is this paragraph trying to establish is that we are trying to mention those events where peasants and jamindars, they revolted against Britishers, because our fundamental thing is to establish that, see, the causes of 1857 uprising was there even from 1757. So that is what our intention to write this paragraph. And here you can see Sannyasi Rebellion. You can quote people have quoted Parlakimadi, and also they have quoted Paika Rebellion. If you want to write more number of events, yes, you can extend other rebellions to other Jamindari, other peasant revolt too. Now we will see the political causes that are responsible for 1857 uprising. For example, the substralian system or the doctrine of lapse, which made the kings to participate in 1857 uprising. Now we will trace back whether these causes anywhere in the history responsible for various rebellions. Now we will try to establish that link. Now what is the answer? The political project of British to conquest and expand his empire through the instruments of substralian system and doctrine of lapse. And I think you know what is this doctrine of lapse. It is something called policy of succession. Okay, it was opposed by Indian rulers since beginning. Okay, for example, revolt of Kattabomana. Who is this person? This person fought a war in district of Tirunelveli in Tamil Nadu. And why he revolted against Britishers? Because Britishers asked him to accept their suzerainty. They asked him to accept his British sovereignty. So to oppose that, Kattabomana raised a revolt against British. This was very important revolt in the history of Tamil Nadu as well as in national history. Now we have one more example, revolt of Velutampi. And who is this person? He is a Devan of Travancore. And there was a revolt in 1805 and 1809 raised by Velutampi. And why he revolted? He revolted against the financial burden caused by this substralian system. And you know what is this substralian system? And under this substralian system, the Travancore company has to pay some amount of money to the British residents and armed forces of the British. Okay. Now what Velutampi felt, this is really creating huge financial burden. So he revolted. Okay, this is one thing. And one more popular uprising we have is Kittur uprising. This Kittur is a place in Karnataka. So in this Kittur uprising, there was a lady, Rani Chennamma, and she revolted against the British. Why she revolted? Because British occupied Kittur on the pretext that there was no male heir to the rulers. So after the death of Rani Chennamma's husband, so British occupied the Kittur. So it is similar to your doctrine of lapse policy. Okay, and we also have something called Sambalpur outbreaks. Where is this Sambalpur? It is in Odisha. So what is this Sambalpur outbreaks? It is against the interference of Britishers on the issue of succession. And after the Sambalpur Maharaja got defeated in the hands of Britishers, now Britishers started interfering. To oppose that, there was an outbreak somewhere in 1827 period, which we call Sambalpur outbreaks. Okay, we will see what is written in the next paragraph. And we know one of the important cause for 1857 revolt is the intervention of British in socio-religious sentiments of the sepoys. Now, whether in history do we have any revolt of that sort? This is what the paragraph tries to establish. Now, the British were insensitive to the socio-religious sentiments and beliefs of the sepoys from the beginning. Okay, in Vellore Mutiny of 1806, Britishers tried to enforce a dress code which is against Hindus and Muslims. Now they also have done to bring in a dress code where they want to remove all the religious marks of Hindus, and they also asked Muslims to remove their beard and all. So this obviously affected the religious sentiments of Hindus as well as Muslims. So they have revolted. That is called Vellore Mutiny of 1806. So prior to 1857 also we have seen one more sepoy revolt in 1806. Okay, but maybe in violent means this is not as much as violent as 1857 uprising. Okay, now we will move on to the next paragraph. We know that British used to have this racial and cultural superiority. They feel that they are civilized and Indians are barbaric, and they want to civilize India. So from this understanding, they used to interfere in what you call social and religious customs of various sections, especially tribals. The racial and cultural superiority which the British presumed for themselves undermined the socio-religious customs of tribals, who violently resented quite often. Actually, most of the other movements, for example, Jamindars or Sepoy movements, they got inspired by the tribal movements. So because of that, we choose an answer which emphasized on tribal revolt too. For example, the Pharisees revolt and Bill's Cole's uprising. You can quote many tribal revolts, but most of the answers which we got, they emphasized only on this part. They wrote different tribal revolts and why they fought, and they missed the context in which they have to place this content. Okay, and of course you may not get good marks for that answer. Okay, and Pharisees revolt, they have revolted because Britishers intervened in their Islamic faith. So it is a Islamic reform movement that was fought in somewhere in 1838 and 1862. And we have witnessed Bills and Cole uprising. You can mention other revolts also which you remember. Okay, we will look into the conclusion. The accumulation of grievances by various sections against the British policies led to various small and big rebellions initially, but later it culminated in a violent and large-scale upsurge named 1857 revolt. It looks like it is a comprehension. It's a comprehending of what it is understood, what the content is written. Of course, you can improve on it, but okay, it is a simple conclusion. Okay, and we have done with our first question discussion. And we will see tomorrow's question. The question is examine the linkages between 19th century's Indian Renaissance and emergence of a national identity. This is a high yielding area. This was asked in 2019, and we will see the answer for this question in tomorrow's discussion. Okay, thank you one and all.